Hello watercolor lovers, welcome to my YouTube channel Watercolor Impressions. Since it's Halloween, I want to do something spooky in watercolor. This reference was taken at Canada's Wonderland. At this beautiful scene with pumpkins and lighting which reflecting on the floor gives a beautiful scene for watercolors. Even though watercolor is not meant to do night scenes, we will create an impression of it and have fun with it. Before we get on to it, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And let's get started, guys. As always, I will provide the drawing template so you guys can check the video description to download it. So I'm also using a student watercolor paper, so I have to layer it several times to get the color pigment consistency I want. So in any watercolor papers or beginner watercolor papers, so the problem with it is it goes dull and you have to layer it several times to get the pigment consistency you want. So I'll start with the sky. For the sky, I'm going to do a blue wash. So as soon as I finish the wash, and you can also see I also put a lot of cadmium red at the top and at the left. So you could see in the reference there's kind of like a red fog which is happening. So I want to add that as well. So once I finished that, I also went and add the pumpkins which are coming from left to right. As you can see, I'm using yellow ochre because we are painting the light first. Then I'll keep layering the pigments to get the consistency I want. So I sprayed a lot of water on my canvas, you could see, or paper. So once you paint, it kind of gives this melting watercolor feel in our painting. So since we are painting watercolor, I want to achieve that look in it. You could see I also left some white spots here and there from top right and top bottom left because there is like 3 lights which is illuminating on our scene. So I want to leave some white space. I'm adding yellow ochre for it. And I'm also taking clean brush to take some of the paint as well. So as you can see, as soon as we are finished with the top wash, I'm keep on bringing up the pigment all the way to the bottom. So now I'm focusing on the pumpkin which is in the mid-ground, the biggest pumpkin. So I'm using cadmium orange for it and I'm keep adding it. And even though all the paintings are melting together, and that's the feel I want because I want to create this moody, spooky feeling in our painting. So once I'm happy with it, I'm taking a tissue paper and I'm taking off some of the painting from our paper. So this gives an illusion of fog in our painting. I'm also introducing a little bit of darker tones here and there using French Ultramarine blue at the top. And I'm also taking tissue paper and creating that feel. So once we are happy with the first top wash, so now let's go and add some ground as well. For the ground, I'm using French Ultramarine blue, a little bit of Alizarin Crimson, and also I'm adding a little bit of Winsor violet in as well. Because I also want to create a warmth ground as well. And you could see at the top, at the bottom right and the bottom left, I'm introducing a little bit of yellow ochre because I want these 3 lights reflecting on the ground. And you could see I'm also adding some background so that it also frames our the large pumpkin which is at the background. And I'm also keep bringing that darker pigments at the background as well. So when you paint scene like this, make sure to create an impression, and you don't have to be exactly true to your reference because at the end of the day we are sending a visual to our audience. So once you finish your painting, either the painting worked or it didn't. So I'm also taking a clean brush and I'm also taking some of the paint from the ground as well as the lights which is at the background. And now there's also a tree which is reflecting from the light. So for the trees I'm using Cerulean Blue, Viridian and a little bit of Cadmium Yellow in it. Before it dries out, I'm going to add a little bit of darker pigment as well. So I'm also going darker at the background as well because that will frame our pumpkin even further. But once at the top, I also saw, as I said before, this paper goes dull and it dries out really light. So I have to keep layering pigment until I'm happy with the pigment consistency and the value in our painting. So now I'm focusing on the background, but for the background, I keep it as a background. So when you paint in watercolors or any other painting, try to keep the background really simple as possible because at the end of the day, when you see the painting from far, the background doesn't read that much than the overall painting. So the main purpose or the motive of this painting is to get the lighting and the pumpkins in our scene. So I'm keep building up the darker pigment consistency at the background because this also helps us to frame over the pumpkin in the midground. So now I'm going to take Payne's Gray and I'm going to add some details on our pumpkin. And I'm not like here, as you can see, I'm not being true to our reference, but I'm getting the impression of the details as well. And as I said, and I also cautioned you guys that it's gonna get super light, so I'm layering over with cadmium orange again to get that consistency in our big pumpkin. And now I'm taking cadmium orange and a little bit of yellow in it. So now we can start adding the pumpkins, which is at the top. So I'll start at the left, and you could see as soon as I added the pumpkin, you could see the light popped up in our reference. So this is how watercolor works. So you start with the light, then you layer it, and you can see the whole scene is coming along as soon as we added those pumpkins in our scene. So I'll keep doing that and I'll finish it. So I went again and finished all the pumpkins, and now I'm going to introduce a little bit of light illuminating on the pumpkins. So there are some pumpkins which are receiving the red light, so I'm also adding that as well. To have a 3D feel in our pumpkin, there's also darker value at the top, at the bottom. To do that, I'm using Winsor Violet and a little bit of Payne's Gray to get the 3D feeling in it. So I'll layer the pigment till I'm happy with pumpkin. I'll keep layering the pumpkins till I'm happy with it, so I'm keep doing it. And I also noticed that the light inside the pumpkin got a little bit lighter, so I'm using pure pigment of Cadmium Yellow. I'm just layering it inside. And I also noticed that there is also like a light orange lighting which is happening inside the pumpkin, so I'm also adding that as well using cadmium orange as well. And this will look good at the end once it dries up. So once I finish everything, so I'm going to add the figures now. I'll start from the foreground. So these figures are going to be as a silhouette, so this also helps us to the light and the shadows, and it brings the overall scene as well. So whenever you paint figures, like make sure to group them together if they are close together, because that way it doesn't look like an unconnected shape in our painting. And I'm going to start with the foreground, and I'm slowly introducing a lot of figures at the background as well. And this also helps us to create some perspective in our scene. So you could see I'm also layering it in a way that against the light, so that it kind of gives a contrast between light and shadows. And you can also see as soon as we add the figures in our scene, the whole scene came alive. Even though it looks brighter because of the lighting which I have while I was recording, but in reality it looks a little bit darker when I finish the painting. So I'll keep doing it, and I'm also going to connect the shapes which are in the foreground and the midground as well. And you can see wherever I see a darker pigment, I'm going to introduce it. So since I said this paper is going to be super dull, I'll keep building up the pigment as well. So now I'm going to be connecting the pumpkins at the top. So because these are connected through wires, so I'm using a rigger brush, and I'm taking Payne's Gray to add the detail as well. And I'm also not being true to the details which are in the reference, but I want this thing to read as the overall scene. So as you can see, I add a little bit of darker pigment underneath the figure, so it also gives illusion of shadows. Then I will take a brush and I will take it all the way to the foreground, the midground, and the background. So whenever you place a figure, whenever there's a shadow, there is light which also peeks through underneath the legs as well. To do that, I'm using clean brush and I'm taking away the painting, and I'm bringing all the way all the shadows from the midground to the background as well. So this process is fairly easy, so anybody can do it. And I also saw that my foreground, which got super dull, because our foreground need to be super darker in consistency, because that helps us to get us to lead into the painting as well. And since I have a darker pigment in my brush, so I'm going to introduce a little bit of darker pigments here and there, because so that our painting doesn't look flat as it is. So I want to take the darker pigment all the way to the midground as well, so because that also reflecting the pumpkin, also reflecting on the ground as well. So now you can see once we added the darker value, it created a contrast between light and dark. So I also sprayed some water spots here and there. You could see there's texturing happening in our midground and the foreground. So now it's a matter of squinting your eyes and checking the values and adding some details here and there. And this is the end details. So I'm going to use white paint. I'm using Chinese white for it. So I'll be adding details wherever I can see it in our reference. I'm going to squint my eyes and I'm going to see where it's going to add it. So when you do this process, make sure you don't overdo it. So I also sometimes get carried away with this, but I'm trying to not to overdo it. And I'm also bringing back some of the highlights on the people as well. So that also helps us to give some illusion of perspective in our painting as well. And I'm keep building it, and I'm adding that highlight which is on the big pumpkin. And there's also poles which also reflecting on the light, so I'm also adding that as well on the right. Now I'm adding it to the left, and I'm also taking Chinese white and a little bit of red paint in it, and I add the details at the right hand side as well. So I think we are almost at the end of our painting. So now it's a matter of adding some details here and there. So I'm just like adding some red fog on the left top and the left right. And now the figures got super dry, so I'm going to glaze over with Payne's gray and a little bit of darker pigment so that they come in the foreground. And that's it, folks, and we're end of our painting. And happy Halloween, and enjoy it safe. And thanks again for watching this video tutorial with me. If you're an artist or a person who enjoys moody paintings, I created a playlist especially for you guys. Please feel free to check it out. Let me know what you learned from this video and what's your favorite color in this painting. If you have any other requests or subjects you want me to cover in watercolors, let me know in the comments or write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching this tutorial. Please hit that subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And please do share with your friends and family. And good luck with your painting, folks.